Hi, I'm Tom Burgess and welcome to this week's weekly Wake Up podcast from the Real Agenda Network. Now this week you are probably already woken up to the urgent need to take care of our planet. It's blowing hot and cold here in the studio, where I'm joined by my stormy co-hosts, the very hot Janine and the ultra cool Oliver. Or is it the other way around? Anyway, how's it going, Janine? What are you going to talk about today?
Well, very well. We're going to tackle another issue raging high on the election campaign thermometer, climate change. It's been very significant that addressing climate change has become a really key election issue, more so in fact than ever before, and perhaps not least due to the profile it's received from the Extinction Rebellion campaign recently. But we hope that the manifesto from all the parties and green promises are more than just a pitch for votes, but actual real commitment from all of them, albeit to a very degree it seems, towards recognising the absolute priority of investing in saving our planet. And so our team is focused on gathering facts and figures as ever from independent sources across a variety of organisations.
You've been doing a lot of research, I
We have in climate change. It's been fascinating, actually, depressing on one hand, but encouraging in others.
Okay, well, there'll be more about that coming up shortly, but we're also joined here by Oliver. So what have you been up to in the last week?
I've been up to quite a lot, Tom. I've actually been to a couple of conferences.
I know you've been busy working, of course, all week, but you've managed to escape.
That's the day job. But on top of that, actually, I went to a recent book launch at the Resolution Foundation by Heather Boushey. And she's a CEO of the Washington Center. Come out with another book called Unbound, How Inequality Constricts Our Economy and What We Can Do About It. Now, I think the essence of her book actually is asking the question, do we have to choose between equality and prosperity? And she absolutely thinks we don't. And her basic premise is that inequality is very harmful to economic growth and actually hurts it. So one of the things she actually, I guess, illustrates is that through inequality, the supply of talent and ideas and capital is monopolized, and actually educational and social and economic opportunities are restricted by, I guess, inequality that pervades society. But also, she also thinks powerful corporations sort of also monopolize competitors out of business by having an omnipresence in societies. If you look at sort of some of the tech companies like van companies, I think this is the perfect example. So I guess she makes the case by, I guess, creating a more equitable society, everyone can benefit, stakeholders across the board can benefit from equality rather than the people at the top, which is something we talk about quite a lot.
So the top companies are drawing in the best talent as such, because they become competitive, then there's actually few of those jobs available. So there's still a lot of talented people not being employed. Is that
they're becoming, they're not becoming unproductive, but their skill sets are being wasted essentially.
Yes, okay, right.
So
that's really interesting.
If you spread the love, so to speak, in an equitable way, then you'll get benefits across the board.
That sort of ties in with the Spirit Level book and the research done by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett that a more equal society has better social outcomes. Better equality is good for us all, rich or poor or wherever you are. It's better for us all. Okay, that was very interesting then, Oliver. The title of the book is called Unbound.
Unbound, How Inequality Constricts Our Economy and What We Can Do About It.
I too have been out and about in the last week. I actually went to Delivering Inclusive Growth, which was organised by the Centre for Progressive Policy in London on Tuesday. Now, some interesting speakers there, including Carolyn Fairburn, the Director General of the CBI, who I spoke to afterwards, and she accepted our invitation to record an interview for our Profit for Purpose series, so that'll be great. And also spoke with, amongst the many people I spoke to, Rose Grayston, who was speaking at the event. She's the policy director of Shelter. A few months back, we did a show with Crisis, a homelessness charity, so it'll be interesting to get Shelter's perspective. And Rose agreed that we could fix something up in fairly soon. So rather than me tell you what happened, I called Charlotte Aldrich, the director of the Centre for Progressive Policy, who organised the event, the next day, and asked her for her take on the event.
This is our second of our annual Inclusive Growth conferences, and this year we're really focusing on the practical ways that we can make that happen. The ideas of inclusive growth have been around for a little while now, and particularly since Brexit and the narratives around whether you agree with these terms or not, communities that feel left behind. But it speaks to the idea that we have to think about how we can make the economy fairer, and not just through redistributive measures, but rewiring of these structures, the systems that go into making our local, regional and national economy as it is.
How did the conference go?
It was really great. We had about 200 delegates, about 45 speakers throughout the day. We had Jim O'Neill, we had Vince Cable, Caroline Fairbairn from the CBI, Stephanie Flanders, Bob Kerslake, a huge range of people talking about issues ranging from environmental sustainability, and clean growth was a huge topic for the day. We had ideas around how you can bring local finance into places, with Bruce Katz from the US giving his take on what they're doing over there to try and build wealth within communities, and a number of other topics from housing and health and skills through to the role of business. Very varied.
So what happens next? Is there some outcomes that go from here?
Well, CPP are going to be working with our partner organisations. So we're partnering with places across the country, and we're going to be expanding that to create a network to support places who are committed to doing inclusive growth over the next 12 plus months. We also advise national government, and we'll be looking post-election to work with the new government to identify ways that you can embed clean, inclusive growth at a national level. And then we also work with international institutions, and the World Bank and the IMF joined us yesterday, and we also work closely with the OECD to try and shape the agenda and kind of draw on international insight to really make this happen, because it's easy to talk about it, but we want to make sure we can deliver some impact.
You're absolutely right. It's very easy, isn't it, to talk about things, but we've actually got to make things happen. Have you got any particular campaigns or any particular key activity that you'll be focusing on?
Yeah, next year we're going to be really focusing on skills and the link to the role of business. So last week or the week before, we published a report ranking the largest 25 employers in the UK, both public and private sector, and we looked at the varying degrees of good or bad employment practice.
So if anybody wants to find out about the Centre for Progressive Policy or to get involved, what would they do?
They should definitely go to our website and get in touch with us, either phone or email, and would be really pleased to work with them. We adopt a partnership approach, working with other organisations and various tiers of government and the public sector. So really keen to work with people on this.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Charlotte. I certainly enjoyed the conference, and I wish you all the best with the work you're doing.
Thanks so much.
And later we'll have an update from the Compassion in Politics campaign. But moving on, let's get today's main feature, climate change and the need for urgent action. So Janine, kick us off on that one.
So much information out there, and a huge amount of people doing things, positively and not enough in other cases. So it's particularly pertinent, as we've heard just this week, that from the Meteorological Society, it's now cited, just this week has cited new highs into emissions into the atmosphere. Makes rather depressing reading indeed. We're not meeting global warming targets, so we really have to do for the next future, for all of our future. And the Committee on Climate Change has just, who give advice independently to the government, is saying, look, our UK leadership, global leadership, is not delivering what it needs to do. In fact, it's actually, since the recommendations that it made and just over a year ago, we've only delivered about one of the 25 recommendations. And about 12 of the 33 sectors that are working across all of the sectors, and retail and water and agriculture in this country have no plans to, in fact, reduce our carbon footprint.
Really?
Yeah. But conversely, we've got companies actually like IKEA, although not a UK one, but a big player in our market, investing and making commitment to invest 121 million in their future to become carbon zero. So you've got lots of different mixed things. We know that in the high streets and supermarkets, they are making positive changes to how we act and what we're buying, and we're more aware, there's more information out there. But I think what's frustrating about all of this, whilst it might be up in the agenda of the election at the moment, it has not been within political parties and with government, and they've not matched the things that we're supposed to be doing. So many things the government's been emphasising on has been about Brexit to the exclusion and eclipsing the importance of climate change.
Well, we're not acting fast enough, basically, isn't it?
Well, everyone, the meteorological, the CCC, are all saying you have to act now. This is not just alarmist. Emissions are rising, and
It just seems obvious to me because there's actually twice as many people in the world, more than twice as many people in the world than from when I was born. And it's grown at a great rate. And obviously we're going to create more human activity, and we're still taking the planet and putting the stuff in the air. So we can't, whatever happens, or whether it's urgent now, we've got to stop it, haven't we?
yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we can't. I mean, the great thing, the consciousness is there, the young generation in schools and within various companies. I don't think we need persuading in that way, but what we need is legislations and cross-party legislations that we were talking about. It's no good. You'll have one government or making some commitments, but then it doesn't become a priority, or they're not legally bound to do things. Then you'll have another party coming in and changes it. I mean, it's not. We don't have time for that. So yeah, would like to ask her to recommend that and to file for sort of legal legislation of standards and targets to be able to be hit.
But didn't you say that we'd actually cut the number of green, to use the term, jobs?
Yeah.
Had actually been reduced recently.
Because it's about the government not recognising there's long-term viability, economic viability, and that jobs are down by 30% in the renewable energy sector. This is because that a lot of the incentives and support schemes that were promised by the government to companies to help set them up, which would, of course, create jobs and would also help lower emissions and so forth, and haven't taken effect. So that's why, going back to what I was saying, that these have to be legislative things that have to be stuck to, even from whichever party you're aligned to or government that's in at the time.
Well, I agree that the government legislation is a big factor, but I also think that companies and the private sector have a significant role to play in solving this problem. And I know a lot of companies have signed up to, I guess, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and they have made some sort of progress towards that. But I think one thing I find a bit of a conundrum is that I think everyone's aware that, I guess, fossil fuels has helped lift a lot of people out of poverty. And if you look in the developing countries, for instance, they will continue to use that because a lot of them are, by definition, still developing as such. So it's actually, as you say, talking about renewable resources, but having a managed way where those countries can contribute to reducing their emissions, as well as putting the focus on corporations as well. And I think there are some companies that started to take this more seriously. And I just want to quote a figure here, actually. There's, in the financial sector, which is where I'm from, more than 130 banks with $47 trillion in assets have signed up to the Principles for Responsible Banking, which is designed in collaboration with the UN. It sort of represents and the presented a commitment to business strategies that align with global goals and the 2015 Paris Agreement. And I think a lot of businesses now are being forced to take a much more long-term approach, a much more sort of holistic approach, and we talked about in previous episodes, a much more moral compass in their business models, and that includes sort of sustainability and climate change.
Oh, you mean an overall responsibility,
right?
Not just climate change.
Yeah, an overall responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, but there are, again, going back to some of the things we've all been discussing, researching this week. I mean, Better Buildings Partnership, they've got 23 leading companies on their real estate portfolio of committing to becoming more carbon zero over the next couple of decades. So you've got a lot of these forces coming from business and consciousness from education, and some from agriculture, and certain from retail and food distribution and supermarkets, where that's actually making a change, and from the consumer. But what we seem to have concluded that there's not enough being done from a governmental level, legislation going in and stopping things, and funding coming out in the very areas that there is growth to create jobs, as well as to create a better society, as well as to improve our environment.
I don't think a lot of us like regulation, but that's where the government needs to take a lead, setting regulation, because the free market's not going to do it.
Yeah.
And this is so important to our planet that, yes, we can incentivize, but we've got to regulate also and set the guidelines, but actually make it happen. And goals and things have been set, they're just not being acted on.
No.
So it appears.
No, it's sad. And obviously the Paris Climate Agreement, there's so much around that at the time, and in fact 195 countries signed up to it and agreed to limit global warming to about 2 centigrades or 1.5 if possible. But as we've proven recently, that's not quite happening. It's not attained. But we do need to we can put pressure on the government to achieve it.
We need to show leadership, unlike the country across the pond where they decide to pull out of an international agreement because they think they're being unfairly treated. The way to deal with this is to take leadership and say this is how we would like to do, and we need to act faster. And so I think that's what we look to here in the UK and to the new government, whatever it will be. This new government has got to have specifics that can be done.
Let's hope there's a majority government. Or there'll be no further action, will there?
Well, let's hope there's a government.
But I think, again, on the positive side to this is that it is still higher up in our consciousness as it has been even 3 years ago. So lots of actions and things. And again, we are all trying to do certain things, and we're making commitment to things. And I stress that business is really interested in lining up to this, not only because of hopefully some sense of moral responsibility, but also because they can see that their investors or us as consumers will be starting to demand this. And also within our workplaces, the things that we can do there. We working for green employers, or the buildings that we work in, ensuring that they are green as possible.
Yes, actually, that's a good point.
So we can drive this as well.
Because that was another thing that was mentioned, the idea, ask your employer what they're doing. It was another thing mentioned when we talked about the other day about the living wage. Ask your employer, are you paying the real living wage, not the government's living wage, but the real living wage is based on what you need to live off. Going
back to what obviously we focus on a lot is actually the inequality in terms of poverty. Well, there is also an added benefit, not only from being able to create more jobs through your jobs within the green sector, but also if there's some of the funding and support has gone back that was supposed to be coming from the Green Deal, but seems to have been neglected, is that there is support and funding towards people having their homes, you having solar panels, or which is now gone apparently, and all to make them far more green as homes. It also brings down their bills, so it means that people are having to pay less for those things.
Yeah, and there is some anecdotal evidence just that there are countries that are governments who are sort of enforcing this action that you so spoke about, Janine. If you look at in New Zealand, they've announced it will no longer issue leases for offshore oil drilling. And in Norway's government has announced plans to prohibit the sale of cars with internal combustion engines by 2025. Admittedly, no government of a wealthy country has been willing to have a frank discussion about the need.
Yes, I mean, I think New Zealand and the Scandinavians have always been far more aware, and green conscious, actually.
But I think the connection to poverty and inequality is very important, because we could, if we invested in renewables and what has been referred to as a Green New Deal, it will create jobs, it will create growth, and it will be focused on things that are positive. It can create a whole new industry. It will bring better transport. And as you just said, some of these things will actually cut costs for lower income families as well. So it can make a significant contribution. And restarting the economy, because it's an investment. It's not because it's a lot of money. We're investing in the country, and that's why we need to spend this money. And we'll be getting it back.
And for which, yes, and you say that we will be getting them back in many ways.
Yesterday, when I spoke to Karen Fairburn from the CBI, it was quite interesting how she felt there was a definite shift, to your earlier point, in business and their view that they need to re-examine. But, it is realised by a lot. I just don't think it's happening fast enough. And, of course, I think she was the one that said it, or somebody at the event, reiterated that it was a problem with shareholder primacy, that, they came first and you've got to get a return to the shareholders. We are well beyond that stage now. It doesn't mean to say you ignore shareholders, but we've got to consider the stakeholders. And this is even more important with the climate change.
Well, I think there's no greater thing to suggest that, reiterate that, as with Mark Carney just really said a few weeks ago, which actually saying that unless investors really are taking this very seriously, there will be fewer businesses in which they can invest, and that's the head of the Bank of England.
I think we mentioned a few weeks ago on the Business Roundtable was that influential group in the US who basically talked about a shift. Their previous premise was based around shareholder value was their main aim for companies. Now they've taken a much broader view, thrown out Milton Friedman's view about the free markets and also can solve everything, and saying we should be looking after the whole of our employees, everyone downwards in terms of creating that inclusive sort of company.
Can we just talk a bit more about action that could be taken? I know we've discussed some of the things there, and then we can also look about what we, the people, could do. But I just wanted to reiterate, the Green New Deal has been talked about a lot, but what is it? There's a whole series of things. We actually talked to Colin Hines, who in January on The Real Agenda, that was episode 15. He was one of the original co-conveners of the Green New Deal. And most people think actually it comes from the States. Actually, the original concept was done here in the UK. But it is about a huge investment. It is about installing renewable energy. It is about insulating our homes. And these will create jobs and economic growth.
Said that has gone down the agenda in terms of this current government, because it's been eclipsed by so many other things that they've been focused on, namely Brexit. So all of those people that were looking for things, support in doing solar panels, whatever, the funds are not there, or it's certainly not being publicised.
We could use the tax system a lot more. We know when it comes to cars, we increase the road tax significantly for bigger vehicles, cars and things. We could increase congestion charges or have more congestion charges to keep cars out of our cities. Increase fuel duty. We have to be a bit careful with fuel duty because obviously some low-income families have to rely on cars because of poor public transport. Why don't we use taxes to cut the costs of renewables? So we're reducing the price of things that are related to renewables, whether it's energy, cars, or whatever, and increasing the tax on the things that we don't want.
Key from a government perspective is this needs to be right at the heart of their policy-making agenda, which it isn't. I think from a corporate perspective, climate risk, sustainability needs to be seen as a significant risk factor like any other factor in their business, and taking a strategic decision in terms of risk and mitigating risk, which is what most banks look to do and a lot of companies as well. So I think for me, those are the two key takeaways for me.
It's more expensive to take a train than to spend money on to go on the roads, and we have to be able to do something about that. Where you put taxes or where you support the rail network and things, it actually becomes more cost effective to go onto a train, which is a greener way of travelling. It's happening with electric cars. They're still very expensive, but it is happening, and there's more people. Or people not buying cars but hiring cars, zip cars or whatever, and then plugging them in. And you can see certainly within London, people are taking those options and not having a car.
The other thing is obviously we need a bigger investment in infrastructure, like whether it's wind farms, tidal power, solar farms and so on. Nature has supplied us with wind, water and sun. That's what we should use instead of digging up the earth and polluting the atmosphere. We have to have regulation on this because the free market's not doing it.
And also we know there's extremes in climate, and we know we've seen evidence of it with flooding in our own country fairly recently, and that's set to increase, these things that we can't anticipate, or heat or more flooding. And that's another example where by a better investment in the infrastructure of particular dams or whatever, or the planting of trees, which are good ways of helping the land absorb water, that you avoid hundreds of people going through an awful situation that is actually costly in terms of emergency services. It costs in terms of the insurance claims and all this, but you can anticipate these things, which is also an economically sensible thing to do, as well as a sort of humane thing to do. And it's so positive, and it is a beautiful world. And
that's like a no-brainer.
Yeah,
absolutely, it's a no-brainer. And Oliver's even got some news of what's going on in certain schools.
Well, actually, no, it's this Friday, actually, is the next global school strike for climate change. And why I know that, I have a 5-year-old daughter who, walking to school this morning, she told me, we need to think about climate change, Daddy. She said, we need to make sure that every house in the world has solar panels on their roofs, because by next year, the world might not look a nice place. I thought, so I think her school actually is going to be going out to their local field and actually protesting as part of this global school strike for climate change.
That's great. I mean, 5-year-olds, it makes me feel very hopeful about the next generation. They're just, those voices have to be heard, or as to ours.
Of course, the other things, contact your MPs, and we mentioned earlier talking to people at work and how things are going at work, or whether how green and your workplace is, and also where we buy from and how we buy, so we can take action as individuals on that. So that just about wraps up our time for our climate change discussion, but I'll obviously be coming back to that on other occasions. But before we go, just let's have an update from one of the organisations we work with and we actively support, and that's Compassion in Politics. I caught up on Wednesday with the co-founder Jennifer Nadell to get an idea of the state of play on the Stop the Nastiness campaign.
The campaign is not surprisingly incredibly busy at the moment, given the toxic and divisive nature of politics in the UK, coupled with an election and the various stunts and tricks that are being pulled by many politicians. We have a lot of work on our hands, but we're very excited by our Stop the Nastiness campaign, which has the support of a large number of civil society groups as well as faith leaders from all the main faiths in the UK, which is really calling on candidates to take a pledge to say that they won't use words that inflame hate. They will call out others that do, and that they will try and behave in an inclusive and cooperative space so that they make their arguments without needing to destroy everyone else around them. And we've got nearly 200 individual candidates signed up, and this is something that the public have been absolutely fantastic about. If you go on to our Twitter feed, Compassion in Politics' Twitter feed, you will find a link that you can use to automatically email all the candidates in your area and ask them to commit to stop the nastiness. So we hope that your listeners will do that, Tom.
I certainly hope so. And you've got these little red badges as well, Stop the Nastiness. Where can people get those from?
We have indeed got badges. They're red and round to symbolise full stop. That's enough. We're not taking it anymore. And if you go to our website, compassioninpolitics.com, you will find a link so that you can order some of those badges. You can wear them when you're out campaigning. You can wear them to work. It doesn't just apply to politics, of course, because the toxic environment of politics has bled into so many other areas of life. So just as a reminder, we all know what nasty looks like. We know what it feels like. We know what it sounds like. And each one of us can play a part in trying to stop it.
So is this having an effect? Do you feel this is having an effect on the election at the moment?
It is having an effect. As more and more candidates sign up to the pledge, they start using it in their hustings. In fact, only recently we know that Caroline Lucas referenced Compassion in Politics at one of her hustings in Brighton, and we certainly see politicians increasingly using the hashtag online when they're faced with abuse or when they're trying to set a different tone for the way that they are conducting themselves in the selection. So we feel it is making a difference, and it's just reminding everyone involved in the political space that we know what nasty is and that none of us want it. We've done some polling recently which showed that 4/5 of voters think that the way politics is being conducted at the moment is driving them away from wanting any engagement whatsoever with the political process. So the stakes are high, and we can't leave it to politicians to stop by themselves, but we can certainly encourage them and tell them that if they want our vote, they're going to have to sign up and endorse this campaign.
So it's very important for us all to change what's happening in British politics and to make it more compassionate. But I understand you've had some interest overseas and been talking about this to other countries. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, I've just had a very exciting trip. I was invited out to Australia early this month by the Charter for Compassion in Australia, and I got to speak at various universities, at town hall meetings, and also meet with politicians. There was an enormously warm response for the work that Compassion in Politics does, and also an appetite to set up an Australian version of Compassion in Politics, which would seek to address the way the debate is conducted there, which, not surprisingly, is very similar to the way it's conducted here, probably not quite as bad yet. But we did bequeath to our former colony green benches 2 swords widths apart. It's a very binary and adversarial system. And they also have the flames not only of the bushfires, but also of the far right and climate change denial. So there are many fronts on which Compassion in Politics can make a difference in Australia, and we're very excited that there are Australian activists and academics who want to take it forward there.
Well, that's really interesting. It's so good to hear that. And as we said, obviously focus now currently on the UK and the election campaign. So wish you all the best with that, Jennifer, and hopefully we'll have some more updates soon.
Thanks so much, Tom. Great to speak to you.
All the best. So that's the show for this week. We hope we have woken you up and that we've helped to inform, inspire, and you want to get involved in making change happen. Do email us at info@realagenda.org or contact us via our website, realagenda.org, where we'll also have find links mentioned in the show. So what's up on the Real Agenda? Well, just out is an episode called Tax, Trust and Transparency, and it's part of a 3-part interview with Julian Richer on our Profit for Purpose series. And of course, the weekly Wake Up will be back again next Friday. Our special thanks to our sponsors, Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. So thanks, team. Any final thoughts for today?
Well, just to go back to reminding people how to take actions and where they can on our topic of this week, there are masses of information on climate change on the web, obviously, but there are petitions with Friends of the Earth, with Amnesty, and there's various ways that you can champion your local MPs to put green climate change at the top of their agenda. And remember, you can do things at home and what you buy and at work. So try and get out there and make a difference to your world.
Okay, thanks very much, Janine. Oliver, anything to add? You're getting down to the school on Friday, are you?
I'm certainly thinking about it, if time permitting.
Well, one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. That's the Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.